Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Mindgasms. So, I'm going to do part 4 of my series on the book by Emma Goldman called Anarchism and Other Essays today. And so, this is Emma Goldman here. She's kind of scary and creepy looking, right? And so, like I said, I'm talking about her book called Anarchism and Other Essays. And she was basically a famous classical anarchist, and she also was against the women's suffrage movement, but she still called herself a feminist, which is interesting, right? So, and the reason that she was against the women's suffrage movement is that she thought it promoted old-fashioned sexist, typical Puritan Protestant Christian values of seeing women as second-class citizens and actually propped up denying equal rights for women. So this is votes for women here, right? So obviously a big crucial aspect of the women's suffrage movement was to get the right for votes, because before the women's suffrage movement, women did not have the legal right to vote because they were literally legally considered second-class citizens, right? So, as I said, Emma Goldman was an anarchist, and she was even more radical than some other anarchists because a lot of classical anarchists disagreed about the degree to which violence was justified to pursue your goals. So she was for political assassinations. And these are obviously famous politicians here who have been assassinated. We've got Gandhi, JFK, and MLK, Martin Luther King Jr. And there were obviously JFK in particular. There are massive conspiracy theories about whether he was murdered by the American government or murdered by the Russian government or murdered by Cuba or all sorts of other things, and that there were more than one shooter. I'm kind of ambiguous about that, in my opinion. And some people have convincing arguments, but the Warren Commission or the Warren Report or whatever it's called is apparently relatively accurate. I've seen documentaries and read books and seen Mythbusters episodes about this, but it's very interesting to consider either way. Anyway, there are rumors, and perhaps it's been confirmed even, I'm not too sure, that Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated by, I don't remember whether it's the FBI or the CIA, but they had recordings of him cheating on his wife, and they basically assassinated him because he was too much of a threat. So I'm pretty sure that actually has been confirmed, though, but don't quote me on that. But anyway, so this is one area, like I said, where Emma Goldman disagreed with other anarchists, because some believed in peaceful revolution against the government to engineer anarchism, and she thought that it was necessary to even assassinate politicians. So perhaps she would have been fine with assassinating all those politicians that I just showed there, MLK, Gandhi, and JFK, of course. So, but what we're talking about here is prostitution. So, oh, my headphones just got disconnected, but that's okay. So what we're talking about here, though, is her opinion on sex work and prostitution. So I wanted to make a video about this in my series on her essays on anarchism and other subjects, because she had a very interesting and kind of surprising and counterintuitive opinion about it. And her opinion was basically that prostitution should be legalized because it's bad, not because it's good, as is often the case usually, right? So this is a picture that encompasses a lot of issues right now, I think. There's a prostitute in a protest with a mask on because it's during COVID, and she has that sign that says "Sex work is work, my body is my business." I don't know what decrami means. So this is obviously a very contentious debate, especially in terms of it being during the COVID pandemic right now, right? Because I personally am of the opinion of a lot of anarchists and libertarians that prostitution should be legalized, and I even have I don't know, like a somewhat progressive or socialist interpretation on it, in my opinion, which is that prostitution should be legalized, taxed, and regulated to an extent. Like, one of my friends brought up the point that it is, you can question whether the government should make tax revenue or be able to regulate prostitution. And maybe regulating prostitution doesn't make sense because it's regulating what women do with their bodies rather than just legalizing it. But I'm honestly okay with them getting tax revenue from selling sex, because I'm also okay with them getting revenue from selling drugs, because I think all drugs should be legalized too. So, and it's safer than them being illegal, because the drug war is the fucking largest war of the 20th and 21st century and has caused way more death and violence than any other war, and it basically causes way more problems than it solves. But like I said, Emma Goldman was for legalizing prostitution because she thought it was bad. Unlike a lot of people who think that prostitution is good. It's the oldest profession in the world. Women prostitutes and brothel owners were the original female entrepreneurs. They were the first female entrepreneurs. Brothels, brothel owners, madams who owned brothels, were the first like major entrepreneurs. They could control what happens there, and they could throw men out if they got all rowdy or anything like that. And prostitutes, as long as they don't have pimps, of course, they're their own personal entrepreneurs. They regulate what they get. And if I understand correctly, and I have investigated this a little bit, and I know people who are involved with industry, and there's a lot of variation, but for the most part, it's actually just women using their liberty, their freedom, these words that libertarians and anarchists like to control their own body and make money from it. Why not make money from your body if you can and if you want to, right? But then this is interesting, like I said, because sex work during the pandemic is even more controversial because there's a higher risk of spreading around diseases, spreading COVID from prostitution. So a lot of sex workers or prostitutes have gone to just being cam girls on OnlyFans or something like that, or they're still doing it anyway, even though it's less safe. And let's say I know people and know people who know people who can definitely confirm that prostitution is still happening during COVID. But it does but obviously at the same time, a lot of women have switched to just being cam girls, like I said, and then they've lost revenue due to the decreased interest in prostitution during the pandemic because people are scared about getting COVID, right? But the reason that Emma Goldman thought that prostitution should be legalized because, like I said, she thought that the government controlling prostitution is better than it being controlled by like organized crime, basically. And we see that this happened under alcohol prohibition, right? And it's happening with drug cartels today, Mexican drug cartels or any gangs or anyone like that. This violence is caused by drugs being illegal. So similarly to that, she saw the main harm from prostitution being the effect of it being illegal. And another interesting thing to note, of course, is that she Like many classical anarchists, Emma Goldman, she was not only anti-government, but she was also anti-capitalist. Now, there are a lot of modern people who call themselves anarchists today, and they basically are. A lot of them are more like anarcho-capitalists. They're uh, they're um, they're against government, but they seem to be pro-capitalism. So, but Emma Goldman, anyway, she basically fell into the category of people. There are two schools in feminism, of course, and like I said, she did still call herself a feminism. So she did belong in the camp of people who thought that prostitution does inherently harm women, and this is the most extreme type of depiction here, right? Like if you're a prostitute or a hooker or whatever, you're going to be like lying in a gutter and sleeping there homeless or shit like that, right? So, and there are sex positive and sex negative feminists, and then sex positive feminists, like you could say I am, if you mean literally believing in the equal rights of women, believe that, you know, it's a form of their free expression, and they're profiting off of their bodies, which why shouldn't they do if they want to? But I just think it's interesting that she did see prostitution as inherently harmful to women, but in spite of that, she still thought that it should be legalized, because in this case, she thought that crime causes more harm to it than the government does. And you could even say that from this perspective, and she did actually write about it in this way, that capitalism is worse for controlling this industry than the government is. And this is a good classic image here illustrating government, of course, a government building where they legislate the law and make new laws and whatnot, of course. So I think that's an important point to emphasize, though, about government and capitalism, because, like I said, a lot of classic anarchists like Emma Goldman, they were anti-government, but they were also anti-capitalist. They weren't like anti-authoritarian, claiming that government is the most evil authoritarian system and they coerce you and they're evil and all this stupid shit like that, like anarcho-capitalists say. They were also against capitalism. And I think this right here is a good classic, like literally cartoonish as in cartoon picture of capitalism, and this would be more of an anti-capitalist depiction of capitalism, which a lot of classic anarchists like Emma Goldman and Bakunin and Kropotkin were contrary to what popular so-called anarchists like Michael Malice say, and like people like Dave Smith say, of course, too, who is an anarcho-capitalist. I think Michael Malice is more of an anarchist than an anarcho-capitalist, but they both, but I'll get to that anyway. So I think this is a good picture here. The common people that, if you look at this from like a socialist or a Marxist perspective, which most of the classic anarchists would, they would look at this as the workers literally propping up the capitalist owners or the bourgeoisie who own the means of production. So I think that's a really good picture there, especially, like I said, from a socialist or a classic anarchist perspective. But also, I want to get into this here. So, like I said, Dave Smith, if you don't know, he's a popular political comedian and podcaster, and I like his podcast actually, even though I disagree with it. His opinions relatively often. He makes some really good points, and he expresses his points in a really good way, even when I disagree with them. Like, he's pretty against lockdowns and COVID vaccinations, and somewhat from what I can see, which has become a political issue, which is stupid. But he makes a lot of good points because a lot of anarchists and libertarians are really anti-war. So this is Dave Smith here. If you can see, he's been on Joe Rogan's podcast a few times, of course. And people like him and Michael Malice, which now that I've educated myself more on reading some of the classic Austrian economists that libertarians and anarcho-capitalists talk about all the time, like Hans Hermann Hoppe and Hayek and all those intellectuals they mention all the time. Now that I've read more of their work, it seems to me like they were just more like classical liberals, or I don't know, like neoliberals or something like that. Because none of these guys that I've read so far anyway, like Hayek and Hans Hermann Hoppe, neither of them are like anarchists, and neither of them are saying like we should abolish government. They're just saying we should have a government that's organized around the principles of free market capitalism, and that you need to have government legislate rules and do planning, but around the rules of a free market economy. So they were still for there being a government. They were maybe more like minarchists, you could say, like a minimum use of government authority to make decisions and change society. But they weren't for abolishing government and having capitalism do everything, which is why I want to talk about Michael Malice in particular here. He's, of course, a famous anarchist, and I'm honestly like a fan of him too. I like his books in particular, like The New Right, for example. That's a really good book. And he has some really interesting thoughts, I think, too. But he's an anarchist, and he calls himself an anarchist, and I think he often distinguishes himself from being an anarchist rather than a anarcho-capitalist. But he often sounds and makes similar statements to what someone like Dave Smith says, like basically arguing that capitalism is evil and destroys everything, other way around. The government is evil and destroys everything. Oh, here's a picture. I forgot to show this before. This is a picture of that book, Emma Goldman's book that I'm talking about, that has this essay in it that I'm talking about called Anarchism and Other Essays. I think this is a really cool picture of it here. So check out that book if you want to. But anyway, yeah, so Michael Malice, and he often talks about classic anarchists. Like he even wrote, and I want to read his new book that's specifically about anarchism, The Anarchist Handbook, which sounds interesting. But from what I've heard say about it so far, I've never heard him acknowledge that classical anarchists like Emma Goldman and Bakunin and Kropotkin, that they were literally anti-capitalists and like socialists and Marxists, especially in the sense that they like some of them, like Bakunin's particularly, he literally used like Marxist sounding language. He used words like the proletariat and the bourgeoisie. So this is what kind of annoys me. Like, these people were socialists. They were anti-capitalist and anti-government. I'm not an anarchist or a libertarian or an anarcho-capitalist, but I'm not a lefty either. But it just seems like it's either disingenuous or ignorance on his part and on their part. Like, these people were socialists. They were not anarcho-capitalists. These guys never talk about how anarcho-capitalism is a historically very new thing. Anarchists started off as left-wingers. They saw anarchism as a means of achieving left-wing goals. So just think about that and read these classic anarchist texts like Anarchism and Other Essays, anything by Emma Goldman, anything by Bakunin, anything by Kropotkin, because these people were fucking leftists. They were socialists, and like they were anti-capitalists. this is this is why they were against capitalism and government, not just one or the other. Anyway, I was talking about prostitution in the context of COVID, and this also relates to, and this is the awesome thumbnail that I made for this video, OnlyFans. So, of course, there was a recent controversy with that, right? Because OnlyFans said that they were going to ban all nudity and sex-related images and videos and stuff like that from their platform. And as most people know, OnlyFans is known for being a platform for it, through which sex workers make most of their living, and most of what OnlyFans is cam girls showing people their pussy and, offering like special custom deals if you pay them a monthly fee, like Patreon, but for sex workers. So obviously everyone was really mad about this, other than like maybe really puritanical people, because like I said, it's the main source of income for a lot of sex workers and most cam girls probably. So there was such public outrage about this that they repealed their decision. So then people are speculating about whether it was just to cause a kerfuffle and basically draw a lot of attention to OnlyFans. And this is a really interesting discussion too, because it encompasses so many issues, right? Like sex work, should it be legal or illegal? And in terms of COVID, is it more dangerous or less dangerous? Should you just move to being a cam girl if you're a sex worker during COVID? A lot of people aren't talking about these issues because to a lot of people, they're criminals. To me, they're entrepreneurs and they should do whatever the fuck they want to do with their bodies. And the government doesn't have the right to restrict that, which is the same, one of the similar reasons to why I'm pro women having access to abortions, because government shouldn't be allowed to tell women that you can't have a baby, we get to control your body. Of course, that's a whole different discussion depending on how you define abortion, and abortions can get gruesome and disturbing if they go far along into the pregnancy, but the vast majority of women don't do that, and women should still be able to get abortions even late into the pregnancy, because even when they're giving birth, there can be some complication where you have to choose between the life of the woman and the child. And hardcore anti-abortion religious people would say that you should still choose the life of the child in that case, and some people do. And in that case, some people choose the life of the mother, so that's contentious too. But anyway, the point of this video is about sex work. So let me know in the comments too, because this is such a contentious issue. What do you think about sex work? What do you think about prostitution? Should there be a distinguishment between prostitution and cam girls? Like, cam girls are totally legal. There's some sort of loophole there because you're not actually selling real sex to some people. But then, of course, a lot of prostitutes are also cam girls. I don't know if you knew this, but it's true. A lot of prostitutes are also cam girls. They may be primarily one than the other, and there are some prostitutes who are cam girls and pretend that they're only cam girls, but really the way they make the most money is through prostitution. And then there are cam girls who are only cam girls and won't want to have sex with you because they don't want to actually sell their bodies. They just want to show people their bodies. So this is a really contentious issue. So like I said, answer this in the comments. Do you think prostitution should be legal or illegal? Why is OnlyFans and why are the stuff that cam girls do, why is that legal but prostitution is illegal? Should both of them be legal? Should both of them be illegal? And also, tell me what you think about this anarchism thing, because classic anarchists were leftists. They were anti-capitalist and anti-government. So let me know about what you think about political intellectuals like Michael Malice and Dave Smith, and what you think about their interpretation. And in the terms of prostitution, I should mention that I'm pretty fucking sure they're totally for legalizing prostitution. So they're with me on this issue, but they don't really accurately depict the history of Austrian economic thinkers, or especially classic anarchist opinions, in my opinion. So there you go. A lot to think about there. Look forward to my next video in my Anarchism and Other Essays series on Emma Goldman. And yeah, thanks for watching this video. If you found it interesting, look forward to my next ones. My next video should be, later this week. I'm going to be doing another critical race theory discussion, of course, about how James Lindsay and Jordan Peterson and Dave Rubin and public intellectuals and people in the intellectual dark web are spreading a whole bunch of inaccurate misinformation about critical race theory, and they're lumping critical theory in with critical race theory and Marxism and postmodernism, and all of these things are one evil wokeness demon, bro, and they're destroying society. Kind of like the people who are against prostitution. Oh, these fucking dirty hookers are destroying society with their dirty pussies and corrupting society and shit like that, right? So anyway, both are spreading misinformation, in my opinion. But anyway, I'm going to talk about that with my friend Dusty, aka the Woke Centrist, and we've discussed it before. I'm also going to bring back my friend Peter Salmon, who's the author of a biography on the post-structuralist philosopher I like and talk about all the time, named Jacques Derrida. And he's much more well-read than Dusty and I am in these subjects. So we're going to talk about that, and we're going to share our opinions and learn from each other, and kind of like correct misinformation from public intellectuals, and say what is wrong with what James Lindsay and others are saying, and give the correct, or at least in our opinion, the most accurate interpretation of what they're saying, because what they're saying, a lot of it, is actually really worthwhile. So anyway, check out that CRT discussion coming out on Friday, and all my other videos that are coming out soon. Subscribe, click the subscribe button, click the like button, click the bell to be notified when I come out with new videos. And especially, please give me money on Patreon. The link is there in the description of this video for my Patreon page. I greatly appreciate that more than anything else. Even like $1 a month would be great. And yeah, look forward to more philosophical and political videos and discussions, and also really importantly about science fiction and fantasy books too. Those are always fun, and also explore philosophical and political issues often too. And yeah, thanks again for watching, everyone. And like I always say, I love you all. Keep being the tiny beam of light that shines through the almost impenetrable darkness in the universe. And most importantly, always remember this: the funk cures all, and groove is in the heart. And read more books. Read about these public intellectual, or these classic political and philosophical thinkers that people are mentioning all the time and getting wrong most of the time, like the critical race theorists like Kimberly Crenshaw, and the critical theorists like evil critical theorists like Marcuse, and even the evil Marx, and painting these people like Hayek and Hans Hermann Hoppe as if they were anarcho-capitalists, even though they were not anti-government, and people who are against prostitution, which really doesn't make sense to me. And yeah, give me your opinions, give me all your spicy comments there, tell me how much you disagree with me or agree with me. And yeah, thanks again, everyone, and adios until next time.